What's up, everybody? Wesley Blevins here, writer and director of Breaking 27. A question that I've been asked a lot is why a movie on depression? Why tell a story on that topic? It's kind of intense. And I know typically I'm very formal in the Mission Studios videos, but today I'm going to be just very honest and straightforward and tell a little bit of my story and what led me to telling a story on depression and ultimately leading me to make the movie Breaking 27. In short, Breaking 27 came out of a time of struggle in my own life, where I struggled with many similar things that the characters in the movie did. I put myself a lot into the character of Abby in writing the story, and her story I would say I can relate to fairly closely. I was raised in a great home. I have amazing parents, I love them very dearly, but just being raised in a great home, as many of you probably know, doesn't mean that you're free from struggle. And I remember from a very young age dealing with a lot of self-hatred, and self-disgust and shame for no apparent reason. I think part of it may have been my overactive mind. I was extremely self-aware, much more than I should have been at my age. I remember, at 5 or 6, I would be able to tell when the moment somebody lost interest in a story I was telling, when they lose eye contact. I was hyper aware of just what people thought of me, and I would really hate myself when I could tell that I was boring somebody or wasting their time. Several years ago, we moved from our home in Juniata to where we live now in Lancaster County. And I remember that move being very difficult for me. I think moving in general is probably difficult for most people. But for me, I really struggled with feeling a lot of loneliness over that time. Losing the friends that I had there and not being plugged in yet here in Lancaster. That transition time was very difficult for me. And I remember starting to feel emotions of loneliness and that type of thing. But once I made friends here in Lancaster, because I was so lonely, I really threw myself into the social life, trying to go to as many social gatherings or get-togethers as humanly possible to try to combat my loneliness. This was the first time I was really in too many bigger social settings and crowds of different types of people. And I remember at that time starting to play different characters where I would start to think, oh, this person wants me to act this way, or these people over here act that way. And so I would start to change how I would act and interact with people based off of that. Now, don't get me wrong, there's totally something to be said for different people pulling different parts of your personality out. This person can pulls out your goofy side, this person pulls out more of your serious side. There's nothing wrong with that. What I was doing was very different than that. I was essentially creating characters and then playing those characters. So I would slip into the mind of, okay, this is the Wesley Blevins that I'm playing today, or okay, this is the Wesley Blevins I'm playing today because I'm with them. And even different opinions, like my different characters would have different opinions, they'd have different ways of thinking, and I would literally try to slip into that mindset of that character. As I became friends with more people, I started realizing that this is really not sustainable. I was probably had around 100 different characters that I'd slip into at different times, and I started having panic attacks when, two of my friends that were from different settings would be together because then I didn't know how to act. So over this time, I remember feeling, okay, I need to boil it down to just one character and figure out who I actually am, what I'm actually doing here. And over that time of trying to figure that out, I remember realizing that I wasn't sure who I was exactly because I played these characters for so long that I started wondering, well, okay, forget the characters, who am I? Like who is Wesley Blevins, for real? Not the characters that he plays, but who is he inside? I remember the day that I sat down to think this through, and I started to wonder if there was nobody there to be found. I began to wonder, as dumb as this sounds, if I literally didn't have a personality, or if I literally didn't have any importance whatsoever, and that the only person that I am are the characters that I played, but that I myself was not actually a person, or not a person that had any kind of personality or distinguishing factors of themselves. When that thought hit me, I had this other thought that came along with it, which was, Wesley, maybe you're a nobody. Maybe there is, not only are you, not anything special, maybe you yourself is a nobody. Maybe you don't actually have any importance to people or to God. And as soon as I opened the door to that thought, in came 100 million other thoughts with it. New thoughts that I never experienced before, because before I would always think through how other people were perceiving me, but now I was starting to question who I was to myself, to God. So I remember over this time just feeling a deep sense of shame, and I began to really isolate myself from my family and from my friends, pretty much from everybody. I started lying about how I was doing when somebody would ask. Um, and yeah, I just remember wrestling with thoughts a lot, to the point where I spent most of my free time on a couch, just lying there, just thinking through thoughts, because it felt like one thought would come in, and I need to like understand this thought, and then as soon as I would touch that thought, it would splinter into like millions of other thoughts. Like, for instance, a thought would come in like, maybe you don't deserve love, and as soon as I would be like, no, I do deserve love because God says, He loves me in the Bible, then it would just splinter into a million other thoughts. Like, no, He said He loves the people who wrote the Bible. Like, He never specified you. Like, how do you know He was actually talking about you? How do you know He even knows you exist? How do you even know He loves you? How do you know that you even have an actual soul? Because you have no personality. You have no distinguishing factors about yourself. You've lived your whole life for other people. And in reality, how does God love somebody like that? And I remember slowly but surely, I started to isolate myself from God, because what ended up happening was I started to think that because I couldn't handle these thoughts that were coming into my mind, I couldn't understand my own mind, and I started to feel it slipping away, like slipping through my fingertips. I remember wondering that if I can't handle the thoughts of my own mind, how in the world am I supposed to handle spiritual thoughts? How am I supposed to handle the thoughts of God or the things of God? And so I started to slowly but surely isolate myself from God, because I didn't feel worthy of Him. I didn't feel He would want me, and I thought I had to figure out this trash of my mind and this stuff that's slipping out of control. My mind was just spinning, and I had to understand this and get this in control before I could go over and enjoy the things of friendships, of family, and of God. Because who would I be benefiting with this trash of a mind and this trash of a soul, that's just out of control? Throughout my life, I've always had this sense of this little flame inside of me that I now call hope, where you believe you'll get out eventually. When a hard time comes, you believe, all right, there is a way out. We'll get through this. We'll work through this. It's going to take work. It's going to be a pain, but we're going to get through this. And I remember over this time in my life, that flame starting to die, like really quickly, because I started to question, if God doesn't love me, is it even worth getting through this? Is it even worth trying to understand my mind if there's nothing on the other side of? Once I get this in control, is it even worth trying to build relationships or trying to do anything if they're not interested in me when my mind's a mess? And so my mind would just go in circles and just kept spiraling down and down and down. And with this, I kept isolating myself more and more and more from those around me and from God. I remember one night after a period of time of this silent struggling, going to a movie theater with my family, which are two of my favorite things. And when I was there, I remember I didn't notice anything that was going on screen, which has never happened to me before in my life. I'm always very invested in a movie. And I remember I didn't remember anything from the movie. My mind was completely somewhere else. And in this time, in this theater, that little flame of mine of hope that maybe I'll get through this, that maybe there's something, just died completely. And I don't know why exactly it was then. I just remember that it was then. And it just died absolutely completely. And I remember in that moment that hope died, that little flame just blew out. The two thoughts came to mind that I believed one of the two had to be true. Either God does not exist, or He does not know that I exist. And those were the two things that I was convinced one or the other had to be true. And in that moment, I realized that it was over. Life no longer had meaning, life no longer had purpose, and there was no reason to want to get out of this depression. So I decided right then and there that I was going to end my own life. I knew I was going to do it either that night or the next day. I didn't know exactly how, but I knew that was going to happen. And it's something that I struggled with earlier in the spiral down, but I was never completely sold on the idea until this night. Um, and I thank God. I thank God, and I know it's only because of Him that feeling of complete and utter loss of hope for me didn't last that long. Later that evening, I remember when I was walking out of the theater, I thought, and I now believe that this was the Holy Spirit, I thought, well, if I don't care anymore, if I don't care what people think of me anymore, if I don't care what happens to me anymore, if I'm planning on ending my own life, why not just tell somebody and see what happens? And if it doesn't work, if nothing works, I can go through with the plan. So that night, I talked to my mom, and I am so grateful. I am so grateful that I did that, because that, for me, just opening up and telling somebody started the journey of hope for me. It's the journey of healing. My parents were amazing throughout my entire journey, and as soon as they heard, they listened very respectfully, and they said, "Wesley, we love you. We're going to walk with you, and you're going to get through this." And so from there started a journey of healing that was almost harder than the journey to depression, and definitely was longer than the journey to depression. But I am forever grateful that I started that journey, that I reached out for help. A couple things for me that was really helpful in my journey was open communication and regular communication on how I was doing with people that I loved and cared about, and was counseling, professional counseling I found very helpful. And also was the faithfulness and love of a God who never leaves us, because what I realized through my story was that God's interest is not for us to get our lives together, so that will be good enough for Him. His intention and His purpose is to walk with us through the difficult times. And I look back at my story now, and I'm amazed to realize that He's been with me every single step of the way. He didn't leave me when I was struggling and wait for me to figure my life out. He was walking with me every single step of the way, and I couldn't see it. He was with me, and I look back and I see that now. The things that He has done and used from my story just blows me away. And so I'm just so grateful for that. And of course, my story is my story, and your story is your story. No two stories are the same. Depression is uniquely personal because God has intimately made each of us uniquely personal. And so what oftentimes happens is we think that, depression or struggles or loneliness is always going to look the same, and there's, one answer to it or one way to go about a healing journey, and that's just not the case. Your story is your story, and God is going to work with you and open up the right doors in your story to find hope and healing. I thank God that my time of hopelessness, where that fire completely died, was only for about 3 hours, but I know people who that part of their life has been for years, sometimes a lifetime, and that's okay. It's your story, and God will walk with you through it. What I want people to know from Breaking 27 and from my story is that God does not leave us when we're struggling. God does not leave us when our mind is slipping through our fingertips, or when we're stuck in a toxic relationship, or when we can't figure out a way out of a situation that's holding us captive. God is with us in those times, walking with us through those times towards hope and towards healing. Just because you struggle mentally does not mean you are past God's forgiveness, does not mean He's turning His back on you. Absolutely not. And that's what I want people to know. And that's what sparked Breaking 27, because in my healing journey, I was wondering what our next film project was going to be. And God brought this idea of telling a story on the topic of depression through the eyes of somebody from the church and somebody from the world. And that's where Breaking 27 came from. It's been a wild ride to get here, where Breaking 27 is finally released. And we've enjoyed every step of the way. But what we found so interesting was the amount of people who've come to us and said thank you. Before even watching the movie, before even knowing anything about the movie, and just telling us thank you for making a movie on this topic. And I genuinely believe if more of us were honest in the church specifically and in the world, we would realize that we are absolutely not alone. Satan wants to isolate us and tell us, you're the only person who struggles, you're the only one who deals with this. If you told people, they'd think you're weird. that is just not the case. It's really not. You know, so many people struggle with this, and I think if we were honest with that, we would realize that we aren't alone. And it's okay to struggle. And it's okay to stumble through life and to realize that God is with us every step of the way. So thank you guys so much for watching. It's always a little bit difficult to share my story. This was a very short version of my testimony, but I really appreciate you guys watching this. Thank you guys so much for all your support in Breaking 27 and the whole process there. We're just so blessed to have finally gotten to the point of releasing the movie. So thank you guys for your support. May God bless you guys, and have a great rest of your day.